Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. This is Dan coming to you from the wood shop at DTM Enterprises, my little wood shop in my backyard. I want to mention a couple things off the front end like we always do. First off, if this is the first time you are tuned in to the Spiritual Underground Podcast, what we are is a recovery podcast, primarily based in 12-step recovery, but I do like to explore recovery in other directions also. We have had yoga practitioners, yoga teachers in here talking about how they recovered their true spirit and their voice through the practice of yoga. We've had a gal in here talking about recovery from divorce. We do some stuff on nicotine cessation. So anyway, we're actually trying to recover our true selves and get closer to what we were meant to be is in my book, Recovery. So that's what you're listening to. Go to dtmww.net for my little wood shop handyman service here in the Louisville metropolitan area. I'm pretty versed in a lot of the handyman trade, so if you need anything, let me know about that. If you need any woodwork made or restored, give me a holler. Spiritualunderground.org is the website that supports the podcast. You can see pictures of the guests when they choose to do so, and you can see some show notes and things like that and links to the shows. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cone. That can be had at Amazon. We have 4 different meetings going on in the Louisville metropolitan area now. It's continuing to grow. It is a 12 steps for everyone. If you are a current 12-step practitioner, it can help you grow there and allow opportunities to sponsor people that maybe you wouldn't find in the traditional rooms. And it also allow you to maybe level up and grow in a direction that's new to you. The book tells me on over to continue to grow, and that's an avenue to do that. So 12-Step Spiritual Recovery, Amazon, James Christopher Cone. I think that is, the podcast, the music around the podcast is by Darren Frank. He's one of our brothers. He's on the mend. He's still in a recovery facility at the moment, recovering from some health issues. Keep him in your prayers, and that's his music you hear at the beginning and end of every podcast. So got a guest in today that I have just met tonight. That is kind of cool energy when somebody walks in and I don't know them. I get to hear a news story. It allows me to grow in that manner. I do love to sit across this table and hear another person. I get to one-person audience. I get to hear it all by myself, different than sitting into a meeting and hearing somebody's story. It was brought to me by another friend, Lisa T, who was on the podcast also. So that's who referred. Jessie is our guest today. How are you doing?
I'm good.
You excited?
Yeah.
You nervous?
No, not really.
Good. I hope that people don't, although people do come in here nervous, and I've had some people come in here and share their story. This is the first place.
Oh,
They've
wow.
never done it anyplace else.
I think that would be kind of weird.
Yeah, but they were also friends of mine too, so I think that actually was a little disarming to be able to do it here.
Right.
Rather than up at the podium with everybody staring at you.
Mm-hmm.
All they had was me. So welcome to the podcast, and can't wait to hear what's going on. Anything you want to start with, just out of general?
I'm Jessie. I'm an alcoholic.
All right. I always do like to get people's sobriety date because that is basically I left my birthday behind, and that is the most important day of my life.
That's right. My sobriety date is April 30th, 2018.
Awesome.
My home group,
Mm-hmm.
can I say that?
Yeah.
7 a.m. early worms.
There are no rules, and we're going to break them all.
Okay, great. I'm a regular attender there, and then I do have a sponsor, Lisa T. She's an angel to me.
Yeah.
So she, I was meeting with her last Sunday, and she said, have you ever thought about going on that podcast? And I said, no, I don't really want to do that because that guy asked you questions in the middle of your story, and that kind of irritated me, and I didn't think I could really do that and stop and think in the middle of my story. And she said, well, it might be a good idea for you to contact him. And I said, whatever.
Yeah, I usually say yes, spons.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
I end up saying that. The first thing she ever asked me whenever I talked to her was, are you willing to go to any lengths for your recovery, for sobriety? And I was like, yeah. So she's never had to remind me of that. Well, okay, that's a lie. She has had to remind me, but I do end up doing things that she suggests. and I always am better for it.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, that's interesting because what I hope to make this podcast is more of a conversational thing, where we're, one thing is that I tell my sponsees when they come on here that we can kind of help keep you in between the rails, in a sense, I will have things that'll hit me, and I like to explore certain avenues, and that's why I will go into that question answering or asking kind of thing of drawing some more out. Or sometimes people will blow by something like really nonchalantly, and I think it's a big deal.
Right.
And I'm like, hold on a minute. You just mentioned, let's look at that just a little bit more. So I do like it, and I tell friends when they come on to it that it's just like sitting around a table if we were just pulling up at the kitchen table and we were talking. Mm-hmm. That's the vibe I want here. So it's just two people sitting across the table. It's primarily one person's story, but just as if you were sitting with some friend of yours, they would stop and say, "What?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're already best friends, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's I said there's a thing we've heard forever about collateral damage, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard that. I get a lot of collateral benefit from sitting over here. I get a new friend. Mm-hmm. I get to hear some story. I always grow, and I keep tuned in to what you have to teach me because we're always teaching, and we're always learning. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot of collateral benefit that I wasn't really anticipating when I started this podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, it's probably a good thing that he asked questions because there have been other times where people have, like you said, blown by it. And of course, after she asked me, I was a lot more open enough that I texted you. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you came. I have been looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where did you? Now I was going to actually get to moving down the pipe on your story and what happened and where you grew up and what kind of family system you had and things of that nature. Because I think it's important that I don't know about you, but I know that I had something going on where I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I wasn't. There was something that set me apart from the time I was a little kid, way before I ever started taking a drink.
Yeah, most definitely.
And so I like to make sure that that's talked about.
Yeah, and that's pretty much my story. I don't know what came first, really. Some people say, "Oh, I knew right away that I was an alcoholic," and and I don't know what came first. Whether it was alcoholism that gave my mind like that different point of view and different perspective, or if it was trauma that shaped my mind. Now, that doesn't mean that I had a bad childhood. I actually had a really good childhood. I was born and raised in Mount Washington, Kentucky. So I've always lived there except for just a short stint. I'm 31 years old, so still relatively young. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm 15. Most people say that I act that way too. And I'm the youngest of 3 kids. My parents are still together, and just middle class, basically. My dad was a truck driver, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She always just worked odd jobs so she could be there for us kids. Yeah. Oh gosh, I heard it said like I've had most of what I wanted and everything I needed, and that was really it. Yeah, that's how it was. My family's still really close. So God never let my family or me go hungry. For that, I'm definitely grateful. But my parents were raised in a very legalistic religious denomination, so they thought that you could, quote unquote, like lose your salvation. Mm-hmm. So it was, if you had any of the carnal sins like cussing, smoking, drinking, then, you were on the outs. Yeah. And very much about appearances growing up. And that carried over to my family a lot. I need to quit saying but yeah. Yeah, those.
I hear myself do it all the time. When I listen back to it, I'm like, golly, you ought to be getting better at that by now. But
yeah, I don't know.
Like I said, this is just organic. This is not a sterile, highly produced podcast. This is not what this is.
Yeah, it is weird to kind of sit here and tell one person, Mm-hmm. but yeah, when it came to alcohol, the feeling was pretty much overall that it was just bad in my family. Like, you know, my great uncle had died from alcoholism. My mom's brothers were kind of like the weird guys in the corner at the family reunions drinking. You know, like it was just this taboo, and just I really didn't have any idea what to do with it because nobody drank. Nobody else in my immediate family drank. And but then I saw like my friend's divorced parents. Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. It can be out of your way. I know you don't want to look through it. That's one thing I don't want to do.
Yeah. They were so like loud and crazy. My friend's parents, they were so loud and crazy, and it was like mixed messages when it came to alcohol. So it was like, this is supposed to be bad, but then I'm seeing in other instances where other people are having fun when it came to drinking. And I definitely like the taboo. Anything that you told me not to do, I was going to do it.
Right. It's the quickest way to get me to do something.
Exactly.
Tell me not to.
So, there's that when it came to alcohol.
Yeah, the family system things, I say bell ringers in here, you know, there's certain things that just everybody keys on, you know, and then that's another one that, you know, and I like the point that you said, you know, in one ear I'm being told that that's bad for you, but those people look like they're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know, and if I look at the people who are not doing it, you know, they're looking a little sad, you know, that's not something I'm wanting over there. But this over here where that party is happening, where that drinking, that looks jovial, and that looks like something that attracts me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remembered that, you know, that feeling of like, oh, well, they just look judgmental and everything. But they're telling me not to do these things and a lot of things, but I don't know. So that kind of carried over. But I had mentioned my trauma, and so, and I said I was the youngest of three, but between, there's my sister, she's 11 years older.
Wow, big spread.
Yeah, my brother's 9 years older. And then my mom had 7 miscarriages before she had me. So, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but it was before kindergarten. Probably about age 4 or 5, and I don't remember when my mom told me that she had 7 miscarriages, but I know she was telling me just out of a place of love and saying, you know, Jessie, I prayed for you, God gave me you, He has a special plan for your life, and all of these things, you know, and she was just saying God handpicked me for her. But from that, I do remember, like the next day or soon after, being on a swing set with my friend Chelsea, my best friend Chelsea at the time. And like I said, I was about 4 or 5, and we're swinging, and I looked at her and I said, my mommy said that she had 7 babies that died before she had me, and I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to have died. And that was that disease of perception where my mom is telling me one thing, and my mind is telling me I'm not good enough, you know, I'm not supposed to be here, that she didn't mean it. And I don't know how old I was whenever I began to be molested by my cousin, but it was between the ages of about 4 and 6. And so there was just immediately like those feelings of being inadequate. And you know, my friend Chelsea at the time, she ran away and she went and got her dad, and he talked to me, and so it was also kind of reinforced that.
Wow.
Of, oh, you can't really talk to people about this, and you're going to get in trouble for saying these things.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, but so it's a traumatic it's a traumatic memory whenever I think about it now. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and if I would have found out that she had said that, I would just be heartbroken.
Yeah, it's interesting that another one of the bell ringers of like being introduced that quickly, that it was not safe to speak your truth. It wasn't safe to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it was just still, it's like one step of being a part of. Like there's so many different or blocks or whatever that just puts me between other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I was molested. Had don't remember. I have strong memories of it, but I don't remember everything of it. And so it was whenever I was in 8th grade that the memories of that trauma resurfaced, and I talked to my sister about it. And my memories at the time were that I had told my mom at some point, a year or so after that, after it happened, and she was just like, okay, well, she just really brushed it under the rug. She had talked to my cousin about it, her and my dad did, and I talked to my aunt and everything. But then, as far as I knew, it was completely, we don't talk about this.
Swept under the rug.
Talk about our feelings. We don't deal with things. And so that was an immediate feeling of, I can't trust these people. Mm-hmm. I can't, I can't talk about my feelings, and I really don't know how to deal with stuff. So, yeah, I went to a new school. I had gone to a private Christian middle school, and so then I started at Bullitt East High School with all these new people, and I've always been pretty social, and I had the opportunity then really that I could have gone and hung out with anybody. I could have hung out with the cool kids, or the artsy kids, or whoever, but I because of how I perceived me, I decided to hang out with the kids who had issues. Nothing against them with their issues, but so I was kind of hanging out with them, and I always wanted approval, especially from my parents and stuff, but I would just get frustrated, and then I would rebel. And whenever I would hang out with these kids, it was almost like, okay, I'm getting attention, but I'm also still kind of clinging to that feeling or that notion that I'm not good enough, that I don't fit in, and I'm just a part of, right? So the goths and the punks and stuff, and
birds of a feather kind of thing,
Yeah.
It's interesting that there's a little bit of vibe there that I went and hung out with the kids who had issues. I didn't have one.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally had issues. But, I could have hit it. But so, yeah, it's like I definitely had issues. But it's been me all along clinging to that. Because whenever I remembered, the trauma, but even before then, it was the feeling of something's wrong with me.
Yep.
And I did have a spiritual experience in middle school. I've always been raised in church, like the twice on Sunday, every Wednesday type of religious upbringing. But my parents ended up getting out of the legalistic denomination, and they moved to the Baptist church. And my mom says that that's where we found grace. And I do believe it. I did become a Christian whenever I was in 6th grade, but it's always been still, not always, but for the most part, it's still just been a wrestling with God. I think that what that experience that I had was really just believing in God and starting the relationship with Him for me. But it was kind of more of a checklist of earning His love, it was still the legalistic and feeling like I have to be perfect to earn it.
Yeah, those are hard chains to break. Once those are implanted early on, if I have to earn it, if I'm not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and nobody told me that, but it was just the feeling.
Yeah, I get that. I explored that a little bit. Like exactly, there was a time I would like to say that I was taught that stuff, but I'm not sure that I really was. I'm questioning that I was actually taught that. Now I picked it up and I heard it and I got it someplace, but I don't think the people close to me were teaching me that.
Exactly. And then whenever you're under those chains and it's, constantly failing because perfectionism only
that's just what
results
we do.
in failure, then that just means guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And so I was always lived under guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And so still just trying to prove that I'm supposed to be here. So yeah, I could have hung out with anybody, but I didn't. I hung out with the kids with the issues. And that's whenever I started cutting. So I have self-harm in my story, which is it's a weird issue. Most people don't get it, and I can't say that I really understand it myself, other than it just being that self-sabotaging, self-punishing. And really just self-hatred. But my first contact with alcohol, actually, in middle school, I went to a Greek wedding where they had an open bar, and I do remember going around and picking up people's wine glasses off the tables. And but it wasn't anything like, oh, this is it. It wasn't. It was just kind of like, this is fun, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be where the fun was.
Yeah.
And I remember I had my brother buy me and some friends some Heaven Hill vodka. Ooh. And we drank it at my freshman year, the first football game. And I remember thinking it was awful. But I did think, when is this going to affect me? I'm just drinking this because it's going to do something to me. And, I didn't know it at the time. That's immediate alcoholic thinking. I don't think I even finished the bottle. But it was kind of like, okay, let's, this is a way out, at least. But then I did attempt suicide whenever I was 16.
Wow.
And I remember sitting at Tenbrook Hospital, and I was telling my parents, everything is just fine. Everything is just fine. And it was just like the, the tornado. And then, oh, look, the wind stopped. And because it was like I wanted to just... I wanted to pretend like everything was okay. Okay, I have your attention. I'm hurting. Something's wrong with me. But now I want to flip the script and say I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Which is really messed up. But I just didn't have any coping skills. I was completely oblivious to the harm I'd caused.
How did you try to do that?
I took a whole bottle of there were some pills in the cabinet, and they were my mom's. I took a bunch of those. I think it was like 10 or 15 of those pills, and then I'd heard that if you took enough vitamin C, it would turn into poison. So I took a whole bottle of vitamin C, and then I just cut myself pretty deep, but nothing. I have some scars, but nothing like on my. It didn't leave anything on my wrist, so that was good. But it just feels like a different person. And I did cut for about 3 years, but and it was an endorphin releasing. It did have an addictive properties to it.
Yeah, I'd heard that too.
Mm-hmm. And now I can say that I am happy that that's in my story, just because that's an experience that you can't relate to if you haven't done it.
Right. It's an opportunity to help somebody else.
Exactly.
A Me Too thing.
Yeah. And but with the suicide, with the attempted suicide, my brother ended up hearing me crying, and I left a note, and I was, I will not minimize anybody's attempt at suicide, but, it was me still just trying to reach out, and I didn't know how to do that, because even whenever I reached out, I didn't think that I was worthy of help, and so I would just push people away.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. It's kind of like a help me get away.
Exactly. Well, because it was just the constant self-sabotage. And and it was just the feeling still of, I can't trust my parents, and I can't cope, and I'm going to blame them because they never showed me how to cope with the biggest thing that happened in my life, even though I told them that I was molested. And so it was pretty crazy. I was going to psychiatrists and counselors in high school, and but they didn't. I do need to say this from the get-go. Of course, I can't wait till the steps to say this, but my parents were doing the best they could. My parents don't know how to deal with their feelings either, and my dad worked all the time. And so really I just dealt with my mom, and my mom's mom died when she was young, so she just didn't know. But I was going to a psychiatrist, and they said, my mom tells me, I'll never forget, the psychiatrist looked at me and said, she's got ADD and then just a little touch of something else. And talking about a mental instability, and she's like, it's something else. And I do believe that it was alcoholism at that point. But who knows? I started on Ritalin, on medication, and my grades were a whole lot better. But other than that, I had just been skating by. I'm terrible at math. I took every summer school when it came to math, but I graduated. And then, so after that, I got out of Tenbrook, and, on ADHD medication, and I turned to exercise to cope.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I wanted to be a personal trainer, and so I had my own personal trainer, and it was balls to the wall with that. It was not ever, we're just gonna do one day of working out. No, it was all day working out, and I'm only going to eat almonds and eat peanut butter. I didn't know how to do it, but everything that I've ever done has always been 100%.
Yep, right. It's tend to what we do. We either are completely out of it, check completely out, or all in.
Yeah. And so I that was still the releasing the endorphins, and at that time, I got pregnant, though, when I was 18. I graduated, got pregnant when I was 18, my first semester of college. And so I found out I was going to have her at 18, and I had my daughter, Lizzie, at 19. And her dad and I had been off and on for about 2 to 3 years. And that was really crazy.
I'll bet.
But there was this feeling of, okay, I'm going to do this right. So I did take the whole pregnancy, and I studied. I read all kinds of parenting magazines, and then I was about the best mother possible until she was about 18 months old, because that's whenever her dad and I split up, and he'd been cheating on me with my best friend at the time and whatever.
Wow.
And so then she started staying the night at his house, and that's whenever I had the biggest fear that, how can I protect her? How can I keep my daughter safe? How can I control things whenever she's over at his house? And so the last thing I wanted to do whenever my daughter was staying the night at his house was sit at home with my feelings. And so I had to get out. And the first thing I thought of was, well, let's just go to the club. Let's go drinking. And at that point, I was 22 years old, 21, 22. And I had kind of skipped a bunch of the partying from whenever I was pregnant. But then it was, 0 to 100. And, so it turned into, it was every other weekend I would be out, and then it turned into every weekend, and then all the time. And, it was pre-gaming, and then the bar scene, and I really like to use men to try and fill this hole in my heart, too. Alcohol is great, but a man can, make me feel like I'm loved, and man can make me feel like I'm pretty and like I'm everything. And then whenever, of course, I sabotage it, or it's just a one-night stand, so he goes away, like, it's the reminder that I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. And so I would seek that out, too, of also, still sabotaging and just hurting myself. To affirm, those thoughts, because then that's still that victim mode. Yeah. So there was this feeling of like I had to kind of put something between me and my daughter too, because I was afraid of of being hurt by that. And so I used to work at Chick-fil-A, and so one day I remember, actually, it was my daughter's birthday. I had been out all that night, and I had gone into work early that Saturday morning, and the manager said that I smelled like alcohol. So, there was a talk, and I had been there for 5 years at the time. I'd been working at Chick-fil-A for 5 years. I did marketing, and I was a manager and stuff. And so then later on, I talked to the owner and the manager, and they said, okay, well, we'll give you another chance. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, less than 3 weeks later, I had posted pictures on Facebook. I'm rolling my eyes, of course, of me holding a beer, and it said something like, fuck Chick-fil-A.
Oh, did it? As I say, the first part of that, I don't know if they could do a lot about, but.
And then they were like, okay, yeah, you need to, give us the store key and get out. And, so then it was like, well, if I'm going to do it big, do something, I'm going to do it big. And so I remember going home, because at this point, my daughter and I still live with my parents. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go work at 4th Street at Tango on 4th Street Live. And my mom was like, well, if you're going to work at a bar, then you can't live in this house. Because still being concerned with appearances. Yeah. And,
she's probably aware of this dance you were doing.
Oh, yeah, she was.
So that was
and trying to stop me, because she had seen that I was, like I said, every other weekend turned into every weekend, and me just drinking. And I'd never drank around them at that point, but she was really concerned and was trying to stop me. But I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll just move out.
Yeah, as I say, that she's saying you really shouldn't work at the bar. You're saying, well, I guess I got to move out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I made the most selfish decision, but it was the best thing at the time. I left my daughter with my parents while I moved out, so I could work at the bar and live the high life of
do what I want to do.
Yeah, and do what I want to do. So I say that it was the best decision, just because my daughter would have been really neglected if I had brought her with me. She was already pretty neglected, but still really one of the worst decisions I've ever made. But also in this time, it was the feeling, it was that about the actor and the different mask and complete incongruent values, where I say that I believe, that God wants me to act a certain way, or I say that I should be living this way and not be selfish, but I'm completely acting a different way.
Yeah.
And it was putting the mask on for different people and different groups. And I was still going to church and playing that game.
Yep.
And just really trying to act, and that takes its toll.
Heck yeah. That mask changing is just exhausting, and that's another bell ringer thing, is that most people come in here and we have another world of mine is that I have a different representative that I take with me no matter where I'm going. It's the mask thing, but it's who I'm leading you to see who I am in this circle and that circle, and it is exhausting because now and again you bump into two circles at once.
Exactly, that's what I was about to say. I was thinking of it today. I invited one of my friends to go to my work dinner party for a holiday dinner party, and I thought, well, he'll probably get along, or he's kind of different than like these friends, but they're still I'm still the same person. And I was reminded of I'm still the same. It's just I'm an alcoholic with him, and they just don't know I'm an alcoholic, but it was kind of reminded me, it was reminiscent of that. But so that started to get old, and so then I was really just rebelling and thinking, okay, well, I'll just be the bad mom and I'll be the drunk. And I moved out into my own apartment, but then that didn't last long. I ended up meeting this guy, and within 2 weeks we had gone to Hawaii for with his work, and I was there for a couple weeks and came back engaged and moved over to Clarksville. Off Blackstone Mill Road, actually, for a year. And it was just weird. And I remember at that point drinking all the time. And it was, using people and cheating on him. And, really only living for myself. He pretty much paid for everything. And even whenever it, realized I needed to get a job, I was working at Chewy's in Clarksville because 4th Street fired me for taking too many smoke breaks and getting drunk on the job, of course. And so I was just living for myself, and where was I going with that? There was something. So I was drinking all the time. And at that point, I remember him saying something like, oh, well, you're not an alcoholic because you don't want to drink first thing in the morning. And I
love it when other people give us our excuses.
Oh, I know. That made it so much easier. And then whenever I worked at Chewy's, I met someone who was in AA. And, that was the first time, they said, oh, I'm in AA. And I was like, what's that? I didn't even know. And even whenever he said Alcoholics Anonymous, I was like, I don't get it. I just thought it was a cult. And but my relationship with God at that time was just a constant wrestling. It was God still pursuing me and really just still coming after me and saying, give me your heart, and me just pushing back and saying, I don't trust you. I really just don't trust you. Why did you let that happen to me as a child? I don't think I'm worthy of this. All of that. And so whenever I ended up leaving my first fiance, I moved back into my parents' house with my daughter, and I started that relationship with the guy who was in AA. And speaking with him, it was, I know now that it was really more of a connection because we were two alcoholics. But it was really insane talking to someone who thought just like I did. That was the first time I'd met someone, and he was like, you're an alcoholic because you have the thinking. And I was like, no, I'm not. But at that point, I had been, getting, drinking all I could in some nights and just not feeling anything. But I was able to be dry for 2 years because he'd had a few years sober at that time. And so whenever I was with him, I didn't want to drink. And but it was really kind of weird. But whenever we went to AA, it was that feeling of like, oh no, I don't believe, I'm not fitting into this place, And I was like, you don't need to go to meetings. That's crazy. Why would you have to go for the rest of your life? And I just told him he needed God, so in church. So after that, we were still together, and he proposed. I accepted, and within a couple weeks, I found out he had stolen $1,000 from me to buy my engagement ring. And so then I started drinking heavily because I had told God I wanted this, and God gave me the truth. I remember finding out that he stole the money from me because I had it in a safe in his room. And it was like God was constantly like tugging at my spirit, even though I really wasn't in contact with God at the time. It was just that of like, okay, no, you're not leaving here. Like that gut instinct of you're not leaving here until you see if your money is there or not. And it was just one glimpse of just trying to see the real truth, because I didn't even want to see the truth of that relationship because I wanted it to be what I wanted it to be, and how I wanted, other people around me, like how I wanted to see other people around me. And so it's just always lying to myself. But anyway, so I started drinking then, and started drinking at home and hiding it. To this day, my parents, Lizzie and I, we still live with my parents, along with my sister. My family's super close, so we're all in one house. But
interesting.
Yeah, I know. My brother actually used to live 4 houses down from us before he moved to Chicago. But it works.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I was drinking and hiding it, and I would drink, 2 bottles of wine a night, and just hide in my room, and nobody would know. And then, of course, I was drinking whenever I was driving because I liked keeping it in a Polar Pop cup, and drinking at work.
Yeah, as I say, there's a huge piece of my life where I was not drinking and driving. That was just, when I moved from point A to point B, that's what I did in the car.
Yeah.
I still drink and drive, just not alcohol.
Yeah, I know. And so then I was going to therapy at this point, and my therapist had said, so do you think you're an alcoholic? And I was like, what? No. Am I an alcoholic? And I was completely obsessed with that thought. Am I an alcoholic? And when in reality, normal drinkers don't obsess over if they're alcoholics or not. And so I thought I would try for 30 days to go without it. And I couldn't. I was white knuckling it, and I would, was just still hiding it. And I don't want it to be a drunk-a-log, but I would wake up from a blackout in my driveway, and I would reel out my boyfriend at the time for letting me drive, and I would just swear I was only going to have one drink. And then I still remember his face whenever I had promised that I wasn't going to drink that night, and then I pulled out like the bottle from my purse, and we were at like his friend's birthday party, and I'm pouring it and in a restaurant, and I pull out the bottle, and he's like, I thought you said you weren't going to. And it's like, well, I get to do whatever I want to do, and any excuse.
Yep.
Any excuse at the time to say, well, I actually didn't mean it. I'm going to drink tonight. And it was just insanity. I remember mixing tequila or vodka with my wine, which is... That's still pretty interesting.
Mixing 2 alcohols together.
And I got rear-ended whenever I had a Polar Pop full of alcohol, and I was terrified, and I was so shocked that they didn't call the cops, and there wasn't any damage. But it was just that feeling of, I can't do this. I hate waking up like this and being, being paranoid, and I would have to keep the bottles in my car and hiding them, and also during this time I had been working, I'm a paralegal, and I had been working at this law firm for about 3 years at this point, and I started becoming convinced that they were going to fire me, that they were going to find out that I was drinking on the job and they were going to fire me. So I took a job closer to home, but it was a $3 pay cut. And guess what? I changed jobs, and I still drank. And even whenever I had left the law firm, they were all like, you're amazing. We weren't going to fire you. Everything's good. But it was that paranoia, and just my perception was totally screwed.
Yeah. We have tough time sticking it out. Whether regardless of the truth, if they're really after us or not, we think they are. We think they're on to us.
Yes, yeah. And but I just thought, okay, well, they're gonna find out, and so I got to get out of here. And so I had gone somewhere else, and then after a month of being there, I quit and went somewhere else. And then I was driving into work one day. It was August 26, 2015. I was just bawling my eyes out on 26 on whatever road it is. I'm sorry. And I was just like, God, I don't want to live this way. I really, really don't want to live this way. I'm so tired of waking up like this, and I don't know if you can do this. I don't know if you really can help me with this, but I think I'm an alcoholic. And I got to the office that day. I was a mess. I was still bawling, and I had to write out, God is able to save me from alcoholism. God is able to save me from this. I can give this. I remember literally writing these simple things out. I can give this over to God. God can handle it. And
you just wrote these things just on your own, or?
Yeah. I had to write it out and see it. It was whenever I was driving, it was that feeling of, you need to write this out, because I just didn't know. I didn't think that God could take it.
Yeah.
And so I went and I talked to my aunt. For some reason, I felt like I needed to talk to her, and she laid hands on me and she prayed for me. And it did feel like this huge weight was lifted off me, even just in saying, I'm an alcoholic and I can't do this. And so then I admitted that. But then I went home, and I told my mom, hey, Mom, here are all these skeletons in my closet, and this is what I've been doing. But I went to AA, and I had been to the Ice House, and I immediately thought, oh, I'm not like these alcoholics. I've never been homeless. I've never put a needle in my arm, and so I just saw all the differences. So, and even my mom was like, you don't need AA like those people. And she said, quote, those people.
Yeah.
And, but also, I tried to get a sponsor. I did get a sponsor. She relapsed. I got another sponsor. And I only made it to the second step, because at some point, I remember somebody told me, or I had got this stuck in my head, that if I got to the fourth step, that AA was going to make me see my part and take responsibility for my part in the abuse that happened to me as a child. And so I was like, oh no, definitely not going to do that. So instead, instead of fixing me and working on me and admitting anything else wrong with me other than being an alcoholic, I thought, well, let's just find a good man at the healing place, and let's just fix him instead. So that's what I did. And and so it was just still that proving that I'm not broken, because I don't, that feeling like I don't deserve a good, like, quote, strong man. So I just need to be with somebody who's got bigger issues than me, like living at the healing place. And so my self-image was just so bad. I mean, I still have issues with it, but I was just dry at that point then. So
rescuing folks is one of my go-tos also.
Yeah, and it's a good distraction.
Yeah, keep you busy for a while.
It did, but and that was about almost for a year, and then he left, and then it was also so after that in 2016. Well, actually, it was like the beginning of 2017. I was like, I'm just going to be in therapy, and I'm not drinking at this point. I was just dry, and I was like, I'm going to deal with the abuse. So I was talking to my therapist and working on this workbook thing, and I talked to my mom about it. And I said, Mom, I just want to know, why didn't you talk to me about what happened? Whenever I told you, why didn't you talk to me? I remember telling you this, and I know you all talked to my cousin, but why didn't you do anything? And she said, Jessie, you just told me that this little piece happened. I told her like barely anything and completely insignificant compared to the whole truth. And she said, and then we sent you to counseling for 6 months. And I've completely blocked it.
Huh.
So she said, I would ask you at night before you went to bed, are you sure that that's everything that happened? Do you need to talk to me about anything? And you would just shake your head and say no. And so I had completely blocked it. And so it was this huge realization that, oh my gosh, I've had this mistrust of my parents, this resentment towards my parents, and this feeling of why hasn't anybody protected me completely for nothing. I was,
perception you had to...
Yeah. So in 2017, I was 29, and so it had taken that long for my mom and I to have a conversation. And that was like, why in the world is this happening now, God? But yeah, it was the perception, and it was, with trauma. I have been diagnosed with PTSD, and with trauma, our brains, can block things out.
Yep.
So
I can relate to that too. I believe that one of the things that when we hear the word trauma is that I tend to want to go to like a violent thing right off. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be, it can be any kind of number of things. I've gone so far as to say, you can experience trauma through the loss of a pet when you're a child, mm-hmm. or loss of loved ones, or, what you went through, obviously. And there's a bunch of different packages trauma can come in. And it's another bell ringer here where I hear one after another people coming across this podcast table will speak to that. And that's one of the reasons why I go back into that childhood stuff, is because it is so prevalent. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we skip over it. One thing is we don't want to share about it. And another thing is there's just this goofy little idea around the rooms, and this could be my perception. Mm-hmm. There's just kind of this thing about we start out when we start drinking.
Yeah.
And that is not, I believe, again, there's a nurture and a nature thing that's both. I know this thing has a genetic component. It just does. It doesn't have to, but it does generally. And then also these things that's happened to us, because for me, I buried stuff. That was the way I could cover it up. I did not have to think about the things where I was broken because by pouring booze and stuff on it. And I couldn't figure out why I could never get, and I went to therapy. I went to other things. I could never get that stuff processed in a way that allowed me to move past the other thing until I got here. Exactly.
And I mean, and there's been the feeling before, like whenever I first spoke, I made the disclaimer of, some would say that this is an outside issue with sexual abuse, but for me it goes hand in hand. And because that's why I drank. That is why I drank, with that feeling of why, I'm not good enough, and also just the fear of, like I said, not being able to protect my daughter.
Yeah, I had a feeling that I was broken or dirty or damaged goods.
Yeah, always. And I don't know where that came from other than from the trauma. But yeah, and trauma comes, like, who am I to say what is going to consist of trauma in your life?
Right.
But it just shocks and amazes me how it has shaped, like the color of it. Like, I don't know, even if you look at my life and as one of these crystal balls and you just put all kinds of different colors and different characteristics of my life, but you put one little touch of black trauma in there, it's going to skew everything else.
Yep, negative bias.
Yeah.
It's an ounce of negativity outweighs 10 pounds of positivity. It just does.
Right. Exactly. So
Doesn't have to, but it does.
So to me, it's something that I think needs to be mentioned.
I agree.
But I know alcohol is our primary purpose.
Yeah. Well, this is not an AA podcast. This is a recovery podcast.
Right. Right.
And we tell our stories, and that's another thing. I would take some. I do. Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 Steps to Save My Life, but I also know that that my story is my story, and who are you to tell me? To alter my truth on what that story is. So that's one of the things that I found that through this outlet, a person can come in here and actually tell the whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I mean, and I've actually gone into more detail than whenever I spoke.
Yeah. You just don't have the time, first off. You need to get to the meat and potatoes of why you're up there and at the podium and stuff. And we get to delve a little deeper here.
Mm-hmm. But, what were we talking about? But yeah, trauma. I mean, and every single time that I talk about it, it makes it just, it's so much more healing for me.
And I'm going to guess that people come up to you afterwards and say, me too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
And they achieve some healing through the fact they hear you speak openly about it. Mm-hmm. And like I've said before, when I talk about my stuff, it doesn't carry that weight that it used to. Because I've run it through the 12 steps, and I've done a 5th step on this stuff. And as Bill said, some of our darkest secrets become our biggest assets. Mm-hmm. My thing was to take it to the grave deal. I was not going to tell anybody that I'd had this sexual relationship with a little boy when I was little. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to. And I wouldn't classify this as molestation. Mm-hmm. But it was something that I grew up to be a great deal ashamed about and around it. And I don't know, again, like same kind of thing about whether if people put this on me or not, but somehow I picked up that was wrong. Mm-hmm. I would say society, peer groups, that kind of thing. What I heard was that what I had done was wrong. And I could not let any of y'all know that I'd done that. Yeah. And the only way that I could fit in, because that rang so strongly in the back of my head all the time, the only way I could turn that off was the thing that turned it off was when I found using dope and alcohol. Yeah.
Well, and for me, it was the feeling of like, like I caused this, or like I had some part in it, and
I was voluntary in mine.
Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't a dominant issue. We were both willing participants in this, the best that I can recall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I had that with another cousin too. After my trauma, but it was just, I was still too young.
Yeah. Right.
You just don't know.
Yeah, getting handed stuff you're not even beginning to be prepared to handle.
Yeah, but it changes, it rewires our brains. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least with with the trauma of it just changes, and and so I don't know, but I know that it's definitely affected my whole life. Mm-hmm. So if it's affected my whole life, then the best thing I could do is put some use to it, right? And so every time I tell it. Yeah, it helps. But
I know what we said, where we landed on that was whether if this was primary purpose stuff and singleness of purpose and things like that, outside issues and whatever.
Yeah, and so so I didn't want to, so I had stepped away from AA. I had talked to my mom, and she told me that, and it was just this feeling of like, why did this even happen? And So then in 2017, I ended up having a mental breakdown. It was actually to do with ADHD medication. They had my psychiatrist gave me Adderall instead of Ritalin, and it's stimulant-induced psychosis or whatever, and manic episode. And so yeah, it was intense. That's whenever I received my bipolar diagnosis, and it just did not go well. It did not go well at all. Oh geez, I still I don't really adhere to my bipolar diagnosis. I know that on paper I could say I have it. I think my only reservation is in that if I admit that I'm bipolar, then I'm supposed to be on medication for it. I tried medication for it. It does not work for me. It just made me gain weight, and I'm too vain for that. And the medication didn't work. But what did help was the psychiatrist telling me that, someone who has bipolar really needs to stay on a routine and watch the eating habits and especially sleeping. And then of course that's come back full circle with my sponsor for HALT, watch out whenever I'm hungry, angry,
lonely and tired.
And but from that my relapse came, and it had been coming for a while. It came about a week before I was 2 years dry at that point, and I'd been on the medication, and it made me feel like I was just crawling out of my skin. So I took whatever I'd get my hands on. And, I haven't mentioned drugs, really, because other than just weed and cocaine here and there, and I did X, that wasn't my drug of choice. I liked alcohol. Cocaine just kind of made me level out. It didn't let me feel my buzz, and so I didn't really like that. Weed was okay, but it made me really paranoid. But anyway, so I started drinking, and I immediately thought this is going to be bad. This is going to be really bad. So So I started right back where I'd left off, basically. I was back to using people again, just sleeping around and trying to feel better about myself, drinking, and then trying to go, more than 30 days without drinking. And whenever I had, there was this one thing that I had found in my journal, whenever I was looking to speak, I had been looking at my journals, and I wrote in my journal during that time. It was September 24th, 2017. My self-sabotage has reached new heights. Why is it so hard for me to be normal? I really don't know how to do it, and I don't know if I ever will. And who will love a woman as fucked up as me? And that, to me, is just I'm smiling kind of when I read that, just because it's that's how I felt.
Yeah.
And that's just sums it all up. So at one point I was talking to my therapist, and I was like, I just don't understand why things are going wrong. And she never really she's not a drug, not an addiction specialist or anything, but she was like, well, I don't think you're trying to work on your sobriety. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? But I got back into the gym and church and tried all these different things to save me. And I turned 30 in 2018 in February. And at that point, I'd done okay. So from Christmas to then, I had a couple months that I was totally dry, of course, not really working on anything. But then I drank on my 30th birthday. And I had to pay for an Uber, and it was $87 or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, from, Louisville to Mount Washington, and at the peak times or whatever. And I the next day I called this guy, Ryan, who was the only person I knew in AA at the time. And I said, this is going to be bad, because I know I'm going to keep drinking now that I started drinking, I know I'm going to keep drinking, and the next time I'm going to remember that I paid $70 or $87, and it's not going to go so well. And it was that ominous feeling. The only time I'd really had one. And so it was in March. My birthday's February 18th. So it was less than a month later or so for St. Patrick's Day. I was at a work thing, and I remember calling this guy, Ryan, and just telling myself, okay, I'm going to do fine. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And then by the end of the night, I'm doing double shots of Patron. And then the next day I talked to my friend, and she was like, I knew you were bad off whenever you said, oh, I'm driving on the wrong side of the road. And, it's a miracle that I made it home. Mm-hmm. So then in April, it started off the night. That was another feeling of like, I don't need to go. I was going to go to this drag show, and something had changed with the plans, and I told my mom, I told my mom, something's not right. Like, I feel like I shouldn't go tonight. I feel like I'm just doing this because I had it in the plans, but something's off. And so it was almost like I was kind of on edge of like, you really need to be careful tonight. So I didn't drink at the drag show, but then I was going to go home. But then there was this guy at a garage bar. And I was like, okay, well, we'll just go in there and we'll just have one. And that's famous last words, yep. Right? So I went in there and really started drinking. And because, I was gunning for that feeling of, okay, I'm a part of, with this guy and this group. Like, I want to be a part of with them. And I want to feel better. And I want this guy to like me. So then I drove drunk from Garage Bar to TK's in Fern Creek, and then I was completely plastered on the way back to this guy's house. And it was this feeling of, I don't even want to be here. I don't want to be here at all. This is not good. This is not good at all. And I've like overdrawn my account at that point. Like, I don't know how my charge card was still going. I was buying shots and rounds for everybody. I think I almost tried to beat up his ex-girlfriend or whoever was at the bar. It was just not, oh God. I mean, it was unlovely creature in his cups,
Yeah.
Just terrible. And, it just makes me sick in my stomach. And so I ran out of that guy's house at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving home. On the back roads of Mount Washington. I drop a wheel, hit a couple mailboxes, go over this creek, almost flip my car because this totals it, and pop all the tires. Get back on the road, and then I'm driving to the house, and I'm so paranoid that I think the cops are going to come. I almost, the tires are all popped. I almost parked the car in the back of the house, like in the backyard, because I thought the cops were going to come find me.
Yeah.
And then 2 hours later, I woke up, and I told my parents had heard me come in. And I passed out. And then they're awake at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm a mess. And I'm just telling them, I really can't do this. I'm really seriously an alcoholic. I cannot drink. I can't even have just one. Oh my gosh, look at all this. Look at what I did. And then I cried all day. And so then that Tuesday, I had counseling, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go to AA. My counselor didn't tell me AA. It was just basically I had heard from that one relationship that AA, bless you,
wow,
that AA is the only thing that works. And
it's the only thing that worked for me.
So, yeah, I mean, whatever. However anybody else gets sober, that's great. But that's just what I had heard. So, whatever reason, I was like, okay, let's just do AA. And I hadn't even really adhered to it, that first time. So, I went to a meeting on that Tuesday night, and I bawled like a baby, and it was just this feeling of surrender, of, you know, I had tried everything else to fill this hole, and I knew the only thing to really help me was God. So, and it was just this, I had to just stop fighting with him. You know, he was there the whole time. I just kept, you know, wrestling with him.
Yeah.
So, I was bawling my eyes out, and these ladies were so nice. It's a Tuesday night meeting in Fern Creek, and they gave me, you know, all their names. And then at that moment, I thought, okay, I'm going to pick a really good sponsor, but God, I don't know who to pick, so please just bring me a good sponsor. For whatever reason, I didn't ask any of the ladies at that meeting, and somebody got me a meeting directory, and I opened it up, and I saw the 7 a.m. early worms. So I went to the early worms. I was about 30 minutes late to a 45-minute meeting. I sat down, and at some point I'm talking in the middle of the meeting, and they were like, you know, are you new? And I was like, yeah, I'm Jessie, and I totaled my car on Sunday a few days ago. And I just laughed. Like, I was like, ha, you know. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, okay. And then I heard Lisa T, and I don't remember anything that she said, but I remember God saying, okay, that's her.
Cool.
So I went up to her afterwards, and I had been told whenever in 2015, you know, you just say, hey, I want what you have. I didn't know what in the hell Lisa had, but I was like, hey, I want what you have. Can you be my sponsor? And I think I even said that before I said, hi, I'm Jessie. And so she talked to me, you know, a few days later, and she asked me, like I said, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? And it was a few weeks later that we realized that just this synchronicity. My birthday, my belly button birthday, is her son's belly button birthday.
Interesting.
My sobriety birthday is her daughter's birthday.
Wow.
And so it was that and some other things that was just like confirmation. And yeah, like complete confirmation of God being like, this is why, you know, there's nothing by mistake. So,
yep.
And then of course also, as you know from Lisa's story, she has trauma in her background.
Right. Yep.
So, I don't remember making the decision that, oh yeah, I'm going to go every morning at 7 a.m. to the Token Club. That's, you know, I live in Mount Washington. So I get up and I go to the gym every morning at 5:30. I live in Mount Washington, then I drive to Breckenridge, and then I work downtown. It's not like it's on my way, but God just carried me.
Right.
Literally. You know, I didn't make 90 and 90. I made probably like 70-ish and 90. But God carried me through it. And I picked up the phone and I called people. I had been isolated really at that point. I remember starting 2018 like, okay, God, I don't really want a relationship because I knew that I didn't know how to do it. But I know I can't do this by myself. You know, or not really feeling, not even talking to God, but just talking to like my mom and just like, oh my gosh, you know, nobody wants to be my friend and I can't, you know, I'm a single mom and I can't do this all by myself, and just the fear of being alone. But also who wants to be around me whenever I'm not taking responsibility for anything and I'm the victim, and I wasn't being a good friend, you know? So, I get into AA and I have instant friends, and I picked up the phone and I talked their heads off, and it's just amazing. The fellowship is so amazing.
It is.
And so I swear I'm getting to the end of this, but there was one part. So then whenever I remember telling Lisa on my first step, I said, okay, I want you to know though that I really am terrified of the fifth step because, you know, there's this one part with my trauma and all this stuff. And she was like, Jessie, what step are you on? And I was like, I'm on the first step. And then whenever it came time for me to write out my resentments and tell her my fifth step and write out against my abuser, she looked at me and she said, your only part in this is holding on to it, not letting go. And it was really freeing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really freeing. So, so it's been a journey. I don't know. I don't know where to go from here.
So, you worked the steps with her?
Yeah, I did. I finished the steps.
You got the freedom that the steps promised you.
Mm-hmm.
Then what'd you do?
Well,
Is your 18 months or so?
I'm 19 months.
My math is not great, but it's pretty close to that. Yeah. Uh-huh. So how long did you got any idea about how long it took you to get through the work?
Oh gosh, for the first time, I dragged my feet on 6 and 7, and I remember I had like over 100 people on my first inventory, even down to like the bank teller that irritated me.
Good.
And
let's take a big bite.
Yeah. And
you want to be a little bit free or a lot free?
And then I finished right after my 1 year. Cool. But now I'm in a step study, and so I'm doing I just completed my second fifth step.
Oh wow, so, very cool.
Yeah, and it was really, really neat to see how I've improved, But it's all been about surrendering to me, for me. Like, even just surrendering to say, okay, I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to do this one thing, And so, so it took longer than it probably should have, but it was a process.
Yeah, there's not a should have.
Right, yeah. So it was a process. And then, and it's just still me trying to be nice to myself today. I am... I do believe that I have a purpose. I do believe I'm supposed to be here. I do believe that, I'm a child of God. But I'm just trying to give myself more grace so I can give other people grace. But yeah, it's really just been an interesting ride. I have a sponsee now.
Awesome.
Yeah. I actually have two, but one is kind of, I don't know, she's still believing maybe she's not an alcoholic. She'll figure it out.
Right.
She'll figure it out.
There used to be a thing I'd heard. It was like, about 1 out of every 3 you got a chance with.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good odds.
Yeah. So, and that's what I try to do. I try to stay in contact with alcoholics, not just my sponsee, but I call Lisa every day. Well, I mean, pretty much every other day, but I'm in contact with her every day.
Yeah.
And
I stay in contact with my sponsor.
Yeah. And because also, like, I really do love her. I mean, she's such an angel, and it's just, I've never known any type of selfless love like that.
Yeah, I just happened to check. I was on my phone with my sponsor for 1 hour and 3 minutes today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sometimes longer than other times. I was just curious because I knew we had talked for quite a while today.
1 hour and 3 minutes?
Yeah. It's not unusual. Do you know what the limit of a voicemail is?
What?
Time limit?
No, what?
4 minutes, usually. And we continually will leave time limit voicemails for one another.
Oh, wow. No, I don't even leave voicemails. Well, I do leave them for Lisa.
So it's a requirement on my thing. If I'm sponsoring you, it's a requirement. It's not an option. I will not look down and see missed calls. You will leave me a message.
Yeah. Well, I meant
sometimes I just can't, God has handed me a lot of sponsees, and I can't necessarily get back to everybody. So that voicemail works almost as good sometimes. I remember a lesson more early on when my sponsor texted me and said, I'm going to call you in a minute. Do not answer the phone. This is early. And I look down, and you know how hard it is not to grab the phone whenever you look down and you see it's your sponsor. And I just let it ring out. And what he needed to do was vent. And I would stop him. Another human being sometimes will want to like pat you down and I understand, it's okay, all this stuff. And he was able just to vent and just like puke it out basically onto my voicemail.
Yeah.
And get that, because I believe there's a thing of this negative energy we get in us from different places and whatever we're doing, we have to get rid of that. I can't carry it, right? I have to discharge the negative energy through, I say discharge the negative energy to the universe through safe people. My safe people is my support group. So I can say like crazy stuff to my support group, my sponsor specifically, and just discharge this. It might sound angry, might sound whiny, whatever. I don't have to worry about that because my sponsor is not judging me on that. He's going to allow me to discharge this energy and get it up and out of me, almost like a Green Mile kind of stuff, you know, to just get it out. And that's what he wanted to do on that voicemail. So I encourage my sponsors to do the same thing, and they do it sometimes. They'll say, hey, don't answer the phone. And they will be able to let that loose. Because what I'll do is I want to, like, give you compassion and all kinds of understanding and stop you from talking, and I'll be uncomfortable if you're complaining a lot, you know, so I want to stop you. And that stops that from happening. So that's just a tool that I think about. So I use a voicemail big time. I have to clear it out. My voicemail gets full and stuff. I have to.
That's a real. Like I've never heard that.
I love that tool, and I offer it to all my sponsors. But again, and we have another thing in another place where I say, don't hide your gold. You know, these good things about yourself. Yeah. I'm allowed to tell you good things about me, and good ideas and other kind of things like that, so that I just get a lot. I have a lot of sponsees, and I'm fortunate for that. It keeps me very busy, keeps me green, keeps me in the work. It fulfills my 12-step stuff big time, and frankly, I have a passion for it. And I have a talent for it. God's given me a talent to reach people, and I've got a whole handful of people out there who are sober because I was God's tool, His instrument. I know it's not me; it's that. I'm just a channel, and I get to do that. And that voicemail tool is one of them was handed to me by my sponsor that I get to use. So it's not an option, and I had to tell them a few times, kind of like that other thing that I kind of giggled at. What step are you in? That's a cliche kind of thing when people want to jump ahead in the work, and for some reason this thing works, and we just got to, it begins to be a practice and a day at a time kind of thing. That's what fundamental of what step are you on. Yeah. It's what day are you in. It is not tomorrow.
Exactly. It is today. I mean, and I don't understand how, when Lisa says something, or, I have other friends. I have a whole list of friends in AA that I could just be talking to them, and they say something that reminds me, oh yeah, the keep it simple. And, Lisa will say something like, yeah, well, let's just table that, and we're not going to obsess about it right now. And I'm like, oh, we're not. Okay, it's gone. And seriously, a lot of times it is.
I need those people in my life.
Yeah, and last week I was driving to Chicago with my family for Thanksgiving and to see my brother. And I was driving through Clarksville, and I was thinking about my ex-fiance, and I was like, I don't know, maybe I need to make an amends to him, and da-da-da-da-da, and I haven't seen him in forever, and, it wouldn't be harming me because I don't really have any feelings about that. And, well, there was a whole lot of stuff around that, and she was like, well, we're not going to talk about it right now because we're not on that step. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. And I had been obsessing about it for about 15 minutes before I called her.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, left to my own devices.
Exactly.
I have to let these other people in my life. My sponsor hardly ever tells me what to do. But somehow or another, through speaking to my sponsor, I get my answers.
Yeah, and Lisa rarely tells me what to do. But
there's been a couple times when I was getting ready to do something real dumb. He might say, yeah, Dan, no. But most of the time, and I try to model that back, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. We do this thing together. And I said, at the end of the day, though, here's a good thing. If this decision you make ends up going to shit, at least we're both in it together.
Yeah.
You don't have to take that all on your own.
And that's been, whenever they say, like, the group in AA has loved me before I could love myself. Yeah. Or, that's what it's been for me. And, like, Early Worms is a really tight-knit group. And for me, they've been so open. For me, they've been so open and just accepting of me. And even whenever I make mistakes, like, heaven forbid I do go out and drink tomorrow, like, they would still take me back in, of course.
Thank God that AA made it better.
AA. Yeah.
Because as many times I bounced in and out, and that's 4 years prior to my current sobriety date, I started hitting meetings. I knew I had a trouble and basically come off of a bad weekend. It was really nothing compared to the consequences I landed with 4 years later. But they welcomed me back every single time, and my ego and my pride thought that wasn't going to happen. And finally, at the last time around, I really did. I went about 6 months not being able to go back to a meeting because I thought that I'd wore out my welcome at AA. It was all this. It was all cuckoo thinking and the disease talking. But I finally got tricked into coming back to another meeting through a meditation meeting. Some friend of mine was having a meditation meeting in his upstairs deal over his garage, and I found my way in there. When I got there, it was all AA people, so it tricked me into coming back into that. But yeah, I'm really glad that every single time I came back, I was smiled at and I was welcomed back in. Because man, if it wasn't that way, I mean, I was so bold. How many of us get it the first time? I mean, hardly any. Man, there's very few one-chip wonders that come in and get a silver chip and stay sober. Yeah. We tend to have to hit off and try our own way and go back out and figure out, try the other ways, therapy, any other number of things. Doing this thing half-measured, thinking I can kind of play with it. And finally, I ended up having consequences deep enough to shove all my chips to the middle of the table. And one of my favorite analogy lately is I felt like I was inside a black box. And there was a little pinhole there in the corner that had some light shining through it. Yeah. And that was the 12-step solution. Mm-hmm. And although I didn't think I could fit through the hole and I didn't think it would work, it was the only light shining in on me. And so I picked it up and went with it. And I was spared prison, spared losing everything that I had sitting at my heels. It all shed off, and now I get an opportunity to do the same thing as watch other people be having, the book says problems pile up so deep we can even begin to fathom solving them all. We do this work and the things they shed off. The problems don't even get solved. Mm-hmm. They just seem to shed away. Now we still have problems. I'm not saying that, but those ones that were piled up that So one more thing I like to talk about to make sure that I say, and I'm sure these things has happened, is I have a whole podcast on the miracles that happen in my life. My sponsor also gave me another tool that early on with some things that were happening in my life were beyond explanation. Mm-hmm. He said, write those down. And I started what I now call my miracle list, and I add to it fairly regularly. I still add to it all the time. That's what he reminded me or told me, which is paid off in spades and is very true, is those things, I would forget those things. Memories would fade. And now and again, I get it out almost like a long-term gratitude list. Yeah. Where I go back and look when I get down in the dumps once in a while, I begin to think that the world is shitting on me or whatever. I can get back out that list, and I very rarely have to do that, really, but I still do it. So the miracles in people's lives that happen as a result of coming through here, do you have any of those that hit you that maybe you want to share? Any kind of trips you've taken, any kind of relationships that have been repaired, any kind of my children are in a number of my miracle items of things that have happened as a result of recovery, where my relationship with my children was repaired because of coming here.
Yeah, with my family, they've been really supportive, but now that they've seen me, really get into this program, they're like hook, line, and sinker. They used to be, those people thinking about AA as these, those people. But now my mom is like, I wish the church was like this. I wish that, everybody had a group like the Worms, and so they came to see me, my mom and my sister and my daughter came to see me get my 1-year chip. And,
that is a miracle.
Yeah, but also the first time I was going to speak, I was writing it all out just to get it out on paper, and I was looking for my big book. And at that time, my mom had asked me about the big book, and she was reading it. I found it on her nightstand. Yeah, it was really, really cool. And then I've had other, I'm not even going to call them coincidences, but God winks or whatever you want to say. Yeah. Where a couple weeks ago, I was just squirrely. I have periods of, just being squirrely. And, of course, things are not perfect all the time. Who knows? It's probably hormones. But, Yeah, I needed, like, I was looking for a service opportunity, or I wasn't looking. God totally provided it. And a lady, she texted me and said, hey, do you want to speak at 9:30 a.m. at this rehab that I work at? And I was like, yeah, okay. Thinking it was an AA meeting. And God worked it out for me to go. It was on a Friday. And so I go, it was like somewhere on West Broadway, and I didn't even know what the place was called. I didn't have the name of it, and it looked like I was going to get kidnapped. So I'm texting my friends like, okay, I'm at this address, you know. I was really nervous. And then, oh, sorry, it was a hiccup. And then I walk in, I think it was like Silverleaf Mental Outpatient or something like that. I don't know where it was. But, so I'm talking to the girl, and I'm like, so is this an AA meeting? And she was like, well, no, not really. It's more of an outpatient thing. And half of the group's going to be not sitting in here. They're going to be watching a video on PTSD. It wasn't really, she's talking like that. She's like, it's not really the best video that I could find, but they wanted somebody to come in and talk about mental illness and who, you know, people who are now surviving and thriving with mental illness. And unless you have mental illness in your story. And I was like, well, yeah, I have self-harm, suicide attempt, bipolar, PTSD, and ADHD, and trauma. I think I do have mental illness in my story. And she was like, oh, well, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally God. And it was about a split second of, wait a minute, this isn't an AA meeting. Like, who am I going to be talking to? And then God was like, oh, you know, it's all good.
Yeah.
Because even before then, I had, before going into that meeting, I was like, what is the main thing that I want to talk about? And the main theme that I wanted to, like, touch on was just about, like, self-acceptance. And so, that day, or the few days before, I had, like, found one of the daily reflections was talking about self-acceptance. And just from the 12 and 12, it was saying, we know that God lovingly watches over us, and we know that when we turn to Him, all will be well with us here and hereafter. And the last part of it was, I pray for the willingness to let go of my arrogant self-criticism and to praise God by humbly accepting and caring for myself. And before I had gone, I printed off all of these little slips of paper with the daily reflection on it. And there was just enough for everybody in the group. And self-acceptance seemed to really tie up alcoholism and mental illness. And it was just the feeling of goosebumps the whole time I was talking, and God, you know, using all of my experiences to help somebody else. So
yeah, we say juice.
Yeah.
'Cause that is really cool. I love it when, you know, when God shows up in those just so obvious ways. You know, and there's no other way to explain those things, because I refuse to accept that they're coincidences. Matter of fact, you know, I go back and look at my life now with some 12-step glasses, and I look back at my life in the past where those things were not coincidences either.
Yeah.
Whether if they were positive in what I thought were positive, and what, you know, you hear all the time people say, grateful to be an alcoholic, grateful to have this stuff happen. You know, I mean, a lot of times what looked like the worst thing could ever happen to a person turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. You know, standing in front of a judge talking about going to prison was not in my cards. But I wouldn't have what I have today, because that was put me in that black box where that 12-step life was the only pinhole of light shining through. And so those things that happen like that I love when somebody said, I love it when a plan comes together. When it's God's plan, that's when it's cool, when it works out. I can try to manage that all I want to, and I can never make those things go. And, you know, that's part of that letting go, too, that allowing that to happen and having the awareness to see it for what it is. That's another thing. Another gift my sponsor gave me was the ability to see that stuff for what it is, because I would have liked to poo-poo that things for a while, but he allowed me to see, you know what we have a little joke that goes, you know what that is, don't you? You know, because I'd tell him some story about some fantastic cool thing that happened today, and he would go, you know what that is, don't you? And I would try to give him some kind of big philosophical reasons about what it was, and learn, and he joked around. He said, the correct answer to that is no, Spons, why don't you tell me? And we joke around about that now. Today we're best friends, we really are. And he's the author of that book I was talking about Christopher Cone.
Oh, that's your sponsor?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
Do you know him?
No, I've just heard a bunch of people spouting off about the book.
Yeah. Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I get to be a part of that movement, too, where, like your mom said, wish everybody had this program. We've said that. I've heard it. I'll do a little visual, to me, like if this is the big book. It looks like to me, in a way, people have been going, I wish everybody had this program. And I'm hiding my book behind my back because that's a little bit what it feels like.
Yeah.
We've been a little guilty of not sharing what this tool does for people, and I believe that Bill says it solves all our problems.
Yeah.
And I think it's useful for others too. So we're actually have this movement going on. And it's a meeting I was talking about, the TSSR in the book, where we're actually offering this program to other people outside of the traditional 12-step fellowships. And it's another place where I get to have some juice in my life, because I actually have like 4 what we call TSSR sponsees right now who do not find themselves bogged down in the alcoholism and the addiction world, but they still have this spiritual malady going on. And usually what it looks like is where you had the big thing of alcohol just kept getting you, right? And I had it was a combination of drugs and alcohol that just kept pulling me down. Well, these people tend to, and I don't these people tend to like have a little of this, a little of this, and a little of this, and a little of this, but they don't have any one thing that's pulling them down.
Yeah.
But they're still in that low level, that looking for outside sources, trying to fill the inside deal. And these tools work for those people too, and it's fun to do that, and to watch it actually work too. That's the other icing on the cake. So I also get a whole pool of new people to work with.
Yeah.
Opportunities to do 12-step work outside of these traditional. It's not like there's not a surplus of alcoholics and stuff too,
Right.
But I like the fact that I get an opportunity to give it away to other people, and I've heard it said too that God gave these steps to us. I don't have any doubt about that. And He gave it to some of the lowliest suckers around, some of the hopeless cases, alcoholics. Prior to this program and prior to 12 steps, very few alcoholics survived and recovered. Very few, almost none. And now we have millions, right? We have millions of recovered alcoholics and addicts. And not to mention, if you could count up all the other fellowships that are using these 12-step tools to recover their selves, to reclaim their true souls, their true selves. So, why not add in the rest of the population? And Western religion is not working for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are rejecting the premises, and for whatever reason, that's just not working for them anymore. And we to a design for living that works is what it says, right?
Right.
And so why not present that to those who may be looking for? Well, I think there's a lot of people out there seeking, right? They're looking for something to fill that void. And they may find the dope and the booze and the gambling and the sex and the porn and whatever else kind of things that they think is doing to fill that void, and they're coming up empty, as we know they will. But they're out there seeking, and this set of tools will give you a way to operate. I never had the guidebook. I never felt like I had the guidebook on how to do life until I got these tools in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I've found that it really is still just recovery for me. It's just like the onion, pulling back the layers of the onion. But it's like, it's not, I don't really think about drinking too much now,
not.
But I mean, my sponsor, she's pegged it whenever she said, and then what I say now, that my alcoholism can still manifest itself and tall, dark, and handsome, and I still want to, have that feeling of, wanting to use men or anybody or shopping or food or working out. I mean, it's still that, and so I can still put anything in the 12 steps. So I'm all for that, because and my sponsor's so good. She doesn't just say that I can only talk to her about alcohol. She can use her experiences to help me. But half the time, for the most, I didn't date for the first year, and I don't date now really at all. Well, I mean, not too much. And so she's listened to me as far as like that, still that urge to use, men and whatever else. horrible coping skills to, to feel better, to just change the way I'm feeling. And so she's listened to me, and she's just still taking me back to the steps. And so they still help. So,
yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. I've said a lot, Dan.
Yeah, it's been great. I've, again, the collateral benefit of hearing somebody else's story has been a great thing for me, and I appreciate you doing that, speaking your truth here for the podcast. There is a thing that I offer everybody, and I don't know. So a lot of times what I hear, and I think I just heard it from you a minute ago when you said I've said a lot, and it come out after that, there's a sigh that happens with most people towards the end of this, where I can tell that they're like, okay, I think I'm complete in the moment. That's what we say. It's not that the whole story's been told, but that people feel like that's one thing about coming here is that people seem to feel like they got complete.
Yeah,
they were able to. Behind the podium, I find so many times that I'm telling some little clip or maybe I tell two anecdotes, and then and I never really get it's nowhere near a story. Of course, less and less I'm interested in telling my story in front of that. Either I'm wanting to beat this 12-step drum, and the latest miracle that's happened in my life is usually what my shares are about. I just continually have them. My brother, who I partied with, and when I came in, that drove a big wedge between us. So when I came and got sober, and it's been a big problem. We were 30 months apart from one another, so we were pretty close. I grew up in this house you walked through, so I actually grew up in this house.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I moved away, and then later on, I ended up, my wife and I, when I was still married, and that 4-year period, I trashed my marriage also. And in that period, but before that, my wife and I bought the house back from my parents. So I raised a couple kids in here too. They're actually, one of them is at work right now, and one of them is in her bedroom. 14-year-old daughter, and now just brand new 16-year-old. He's not brand new, but his 16-year-oldness is brand new. He's at work at the moment, but and I completely my brother, and so now I was down. I deer hunt. It looks like I'm a deer hunter. I'm not making excuses, but I have grown up doing that all my life. Now I go out there and recharge my batteries. It's like a meditation thing, and I really love to do it. I haven't killed anything in a long time. I would if I wanted to. I just haven't wanted to. But I go out there and he's with me, and it's been a big dividing point in past years. And people on the podcast, I heard this a little bit, but I'll share it with you, is that he was down there with me last week, and he'd hit 6 months of sobriety.
Oh,
and,
wow.
So he's found his way to this path, and I had nothing to do with that. I didn't coerce, I didn't beat a drum, I didn't, I'm pretty sure that I did not do you need to get sober to do type stuff, But that's the more miracles in my list. That's one of the latest ones, was having him being down there and having a couple weekends at deer camp where we were both talking this kind of stuff.
Wow.
It's just really cool, and they just keep on coming, and I just keep on peeking around the corner like a little kid excited for Christmas and seeing what's under the tree to see what higher power, what God has for me next, because I'm as convinced as I can be that as long as I keep seeking, I'll keep finding.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling right now that it's this. Wow, God has taken me on this big journey that I know I haven't even, I've missed things, and I just feel so grateful.
Yeah.
Really, really grateful.
We'll find that we've just hit a limitless load that will pay dividends as long as we continue to give away the entire product the rest of our lives.
Yeah, definitely. More about giving instead of taking.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts? Any concluders is what my favorite. I got another hunting podcast guy that he says that at the end. He goes, all right, so let's go around the table and do concluders. Got any concluders? Got any message for people who might be out there needing to hear this message, or any kind of what your experience is in a nutshell on closing this out? If somebody walks away, they heard a long story, but then they got this last minute.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Probably pick up the phone and hug somebody today. Yeah. Pick up the phone, period. Hug somebody today, period. I don't know, just stay connected. And I've always heard it said that if you're alone in AA, it's because you choose to be. But even if you're not in AA, recovery is out there. People are willing to help, and I hope and I pray that your listeners find some help.
Yeah, because the power to change your life is within your reach. All you got to do is do the reaching.
That's right. That was perfect. Thank you for saying my concluder.
A lot of these things, I have a really good thing for faces and names. It's just a gift. I would have told you a while back. I can't remember names. That was bullshit. That was a way to not get close to you. I have an amazing ability to remember that, and these little one-liners and all these little things just stick today. My memory works really well today. It's a result of these steps. It's another miracle too.
Mine works more before, like,
earlier in the day. Yeah. Mine actually works good later. So thank you for coming on show. Thank you for sharing your story and your truth with us today. I know one thing I always say about this is, we say it around, if we just touch one person, and the fact of the matter is we touch more than that. But I can promise you, when people kind of go, I don't really have a story to tell, I know there is at least one person out there that's needing to hear your story. They're gonna hear that, and just like you and I did at some point, we went, oh wow, hold on, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah. There's
somebody else that has been down the same path. So thank you for doing that. We'll close out here. This is a Spiritual Underground podcast. It is a 12-step recovery podcast. Primarily, we explore all kinds of recovery. Go to dtmww.net for my woodworking and handyman business. 12-step spiritual recovery. I'll do this little thing unabashedly. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book that teaches the 12 steps to all those. It is 85, almost 90 years of combined experience into this book. It is an optimum way to work these steps. I like to say it is a great compendium. It is the magnum opus. It is the Optimus Prime version of the 12 steps. So if you want these tools in your life, go check out that book. It's in volumes 1 and 2. I would suggest that you buy them in separate volumes too. Darren Frank's music's around this podcast. Go out to spiritualunderground.org to see pictures of the guests, and there's a contact me page on there if there's anything you think I can do to support you in what you need. I'm trying to make myself available in that regard, so please reach out. Hey, if you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. And as always, thank you for allowing me to participate in my recovery in this manner tonight. Peace out.
Always tried to be just who they wanted. Always tried to do everything they said. Only did the things they would approve of. Locked away all your dreams inside your head. Year after year you try to be a good girl. They never failed to point out when you were bad. Stuck to the program like a robot. Became a trophy for mom and dad. But inside you want more. Everything you've been waiting for. Looking for that open door. So every day in your head, in your heart just keeps saying, let go and fly. Let go and fly. Spread your wings to the sky. Ever since